My talk today is on the role of blink in dry eye. So to begin with, some basic background information. The purpose of the blink is to redistribute the tear film across the ocular surface. It's to cleanse the tear film of foreign particles and debris, and it's to mechanically secrete the meibomium glands, thus supporting the lipid layer of the tear film. And as we know, the standard clinical evaluation for assessing blink is an assessment of simple blink rate, or the number of blinks over a set period of time. This is often conducted using an IR or video technology. And the standard clinical evaluation of tear film stability is a simple tear film breakup time. And this is typically conducted by instructing the patient to blink, hold their eye open, past the point of breakup, and to record that period of time. So I'm going to talk a little bit today, I'm going to talk a lot today about blink patterns. And what I refer to when I talk about blink patterns are the occurrence of varying interblink intervals and blink types, that being partial, full, extended blinks over a given period of time, and this would be under a controlled visual task. And we look at blink patterns both as a standalone clinical sign and in association with measures of tear film stability. Now, I have to apologize here because my talk is going to be a bit more clinically oriented than some of the other basic science talks you've heard thus far. I'm going to be focusing on blink patterns in the context of drug development, with the effort being to use blink patterns to better standardize patient populations for inclusion in drug studies. So, 3 points that I want to get across today in my liberally allotted 10 minutes. One, not all blinks are the same, and this is especially important when considering diagnostic assessments of tear film stability. 2, increased blink rate can function as a compensatory mechanism for elevated ocular discomfort and may provide information on a patient's existing symptom levels. 3, blink pattern plays an important role in establishing an area-based ocular protection index and supports identifications of homogeneous patient populations for study recruitment. This is relating blink pattern to tear film stability, which is something that's especially critical. So the first point I made, not all blinks are the same. What I'm going to show you here is a video of a normal subject. This is a subject that is not symptomatic, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the video as the subject blinks while watching television. I then instruct the subject to take 3 blinks and hold their eye open, and we see a dramatically different pattern in terms of the way the tear film breaks up. So what you'll see is there's good stability in the tear film while the patient is performing visual tasking activity. They have 3 hard blinks, and then we see a rapid shedding of the tear film. Now, to be quite honest, when we looked at this initially, we thought we would see the opposite. We felt that we would be extending the tear film breakup time by having these patients do hard blinks, because we thought it would secrete the meibomium glands, and therefore we would potentially buff up the lipid layer a little bit, and we would get retard evaporation and prolong our time. Now, we found that that wasn't the case. For whatever reason, these forced blinks seemed to destabilize the tear film. This was a bit of a concern to us at first because, again, this is typically in the clinic how tear film breakup time is assessed. It's assessed by asking the subject to blink and then hold their eye open. Now, we believe this is a little bit of a concern in that enrolling subjects based on a forced blink may lead to some false positives. Some subjects that in a natural blink pattern have fairly stable tear films, but under the context of a forced blink where they're actually thinking about it, perhaps they hold the eye open a little bit further, or by blinking hard they destabilize the tear film, we actually shorten the tear film breakup time. And where this pointed us initially was in the direction of assessing tear film stability in the context of a natural blink pattern, rather than this blink-blink-open type of technique that's traditionally used. The second point I wanted to make regarded blink patterns as a compensatory mechanism and indicator of ocular discomfort. So to begin with, let me please explain these because they are a little bit strange, these plots here. But along the y-axis, you'll see interblink interval in both plots. It is different. On the left, you see the maximum IBI is listed at 50. On the right, the maximum IBI is listed at 7. Along the x-axis, we have blink number. So we are essentially plotting a subject's first blink recorded under a natural blink pattern while watching television. We plot that IBI. Their second blink, we plot that IBI, and these are the types of figures that are generated. The patient on the left is a dry eye subject that we've established has staining and has symptomatology at times. At this point, they reported a 1 out of 4 on a 0 to 4 symptom scale. The patient on the right reported a 3 out of 4. Now, taken alone, this information is not, it's not earth-shattering. We have an irritated blink pattern versus a blink pattern that is suggestive of less irritation. However, from the perspective of drug development, this is important. We believe that blink pattern is useful for corroborating subjective assessments of ocular discomfort. It helps to remove some of the patient bias. It helps to remove some of the ambiguity associated with patient scales. We can use it to our advantage. Also, we feel that the ability to augment or normalize a blink pattern may eventually serve as a useful endpoint. So I wanted to go back to those two graphs, and if I were to tell you that this figure on the right, I could change that person to look more like the figure on the left, in my opinion, that is a clinically relevant therapeutic effect. So now in order to actually classify patients for inclusion in clinical trials based on a blink pattern, we had to be a little creative in how we could come up with a way to get this type of information in real time. So to address it, we developed a computer program that classifies blink type and IBI over time. So this is just a quick demo of how the program works, but what it does is it takes specific points of interest on the surface of the eye, and over time it tracks those specific points of interest to give us real-time information on the subject's blink pattern. The output we get a couple of different outputs, and here we can see the program working. We know not only what the blink, how the IBIs relate over time, but we also know whether it's a quarter blink, a half blink, 3/4 blink, full blink, or extended blink. So we also gain information on blink type, which is relevant, we believe. Okay, now we all know blink pattern and tear film stability are linked. That was the first thing we discovered when we looked at these forced blinks and the breakup times associated with these forced blinks versus in the context of a natural blink pattern. So we now believe, because of what we learned early on in this process, that the best way to look at tear film stability is in the context of a normal blink pattern. So to do this, we've developed a methodology for assessing level of ocular protection under a natural blink pattern using non-invasive fluorescein staining. And here I have another demo for you. So what we see here is we have the program. This is actually just a visual representation of the way the program works. It's not the program itself, but we track breakup over the cornea and actually define it as an area as opposed to a breakup time. And this is, I think, more clinically relevant than looking at when the tear film starts to break up for a number of reasons. The rate at which the tear film sheds is critical. In this situation, we have a rapid shedding of the tear film and a fairly substantial amount of breakup on the surface of the cornea. That's valuable. If the tear film just starts to bubble a little bit and the expansion of the break is relatively slow, we can track that using this technology, while you cannot track that using a standard tear film breakup time assessment. So this is the type of output we get from our program. If you take a look at the y-axis, we have percent exposed cornea. If you take a look at the x-axis, we have time in seconds. Those spikes are representative of blinks. And what we see, if I can figure out how to use the pointer here, is that this area in here is representative of ocular surface exposure. So what do we get from this? Well, we want to be more accurate than tear film breakup time with our clinical assessments, because we believe that that's the direction we need to go in to better classify patients for study inclusion. So I have a few different curves that are outputs from our program that I believe are good representative curves for the type of patients we see. We have a significant exposure patient with dry eye above. We have a moderate exposure patient with dry eye in the center. And we have a normal subject with minimal exposure. Now, here's, I think, a key point. I took this subject and I looked at what their intentional blink breakup time was. And we see that these breakup times are very comparable. And these subjects would generally both be classified in a comparable fashion with regards to their tear film instability. However, if you look at the amount of ocular surface exposure over that given period of time, it's considerably different. We have a good amount more ocular surface exposure in this patient than in this patient, which suggests to me that this is a more severe tear film instability than what we see with the second patient here. And we know that these different levels of protection are a product of the blink pattern rather than the tear film instability. This patient's blinking more frequently, helping to recoat the ocular surface. This patient, blinking less frequently, has a higher amount of ocular surface exposure. So to conclude here, just a few final thoughts. We do believe that success in dry eye drug development will result from managing the noise associated with the natural variability of the disease. We know that when a dry eye patient enters a challenging environment, they get a spike in signs and symptoms. If we decide that we are going to take up a subject when they're at their peak of their clinical signs and symptom severity, independent of what type of therapy we give them, they are going to regress back towards their mean levels. This means it's drug, placebo, whatever, they're going to come back down. But that said, if we select a patient who is at at an extreme low in terms of their signs and symptoms, it may be difficult to demonstrate a drug effect in that subject or a difference between the active and placebo, simply because there may not be enough disease there. So we need to find a happy medium, and we believe that by getting better, getting tighter with our diagnostics, both in terms of blink pattern and in assessments of tear film stability, we're going to do a better job at enrolling homogeneous patient populations that we can include in our clinical trials. So I think that's it. Thank you.